afternoon, fellow artists. Today, we're going to talk about what makes a good design and a bad design on album covers. That way, we know what to look for whenever we ourselves are creating the album covers for that influential artist. So, as we go and jump in, we're going to go start on this slide here. And I want you to ask yourself a question. What makes a good design versus a bad design when we're looking at an album cover? And I know that may be hard at times to think about, especially when nowadays we just download music off of the Apple Store or Google Store, whatever you download your music off of, instead of getting a physical album. But that's just something to kind of consider as you are thinking about a design to create for your specific musician or band. So, what makes a good design versus a bad design? Here on our example, I have the album cover to TI's Paper Trail. The interesting thing about this album cover itself is that the title relates to the way that the album cover itself was made. It is titled, again, Paper Trail, and his own portrait on this album cover is created by a paper trail, or I'm sorry, a paper collage, which in all of these pieces put together, used by color and shape, create his interesting portrait. Now, the reason I consider this one a good design is because it has balance in its design. Balance meaning that the textures of this cover, as well as the color and the place where things are placed, such as his portrait here and the title, don't throw me off. It doesn't seem like an overkill of things. It is, again, balanced, equalized out in a way. Now, the color is also important in this one. Although you don't see a big splash of color, the color is important here because the paper really brings out the color and the shape and the value of T.I.'s portrait. If you take a look at the background, it's not solely a white paper background. You see some pinks off here in the corner, as well as a yellow here to balance out these yellows in his face. If you look at his face, you have the darker colors to make a contrast, right? You have the dark blues, the bright blues, the yellows, and the grays and blacks in his hair, as well as some of these pinks in his face to really make this portrait pop. So the balance and the color in this album in particular are pretty important. So now we're going to take a look at a few good designs, and we're also going to take a look at a few bad designs. That way we kind of know what to avoid and what works well. So we'll go ahead and start off with Tyler the Creator's album cover here for Flower Boy. This was considered one of the best album covers in Billboard's 2017 list. Now, why do you think this is a strong album cover? What about it stands out? What about it really speaks to you? So now that we've taken a moment, the first thing to myself that pops out are the colors. The colors are very warm, right? The yellow at the top, bright, pops out against that red. We also have it repeated again in the yellow sunflowers here at the bottom to really balance out the artwork. We also have cool colors included in this composition or this painting of the album cover. We have the blues and the greens in the mountains or the hill areas. We also have the cool colors of Tyler or the figure here itself with the white, the greens, to balance out all of those warm colors so it doesn't feel like everything is on fire or everything is too warm. Another successful thing about this album cover is not only that it has great color, but it has great balance with its surrealistic or dreamy world that has been created here. You have these gigantic bees flying around this figure. You have big fluffy clouds that look like they would be tiny against those bees. And then you have this little futuristic car here in the distance with their little suicide doors. So, I mean, everything here balances out, even though the album cover seems a little crazy. So that's kind of something to consider again as we move along this unit. Our next one here is Lil Yachty. Now, I'm not very familiar with his music per se, but this particular album cover was also considered one of the best in Billboard's 2017. This was Teenage Emotions. So, as you take a look at this, what do you first notice in this picture? And I'll give you a moment to look at it some more. Now, as we are observing along, there's a lot going on in this picture itself and in this album cover. Because this album, particularly, is titled Teenage Emotions, you do see a lot of people in that age range of the teenage years, right? Surrounding Lil Yachty, our rapper, who is in the center. Now, normally, album covers that contain like the artist's portrait or just a picture of a single person is normally fairly boring and not as interesting as this particular artist made this portrait out to be with again our performer musician here in the center, and then you have all of this stuff going on around him. You have a diverse set of people. You have all these different things happening and all at once. You know, nobody is paying attention to this famous person that's smack dab in the middle of this crowd. So this is very interesting in the way that there are a lot of things going on, but it is still balanced. The thing you look at first is going to be again our performer, and then the things that are happening around him. The color is also important here because as you notice, the reds are used as kind of a background color for this, and anything that is different from the red really makes things pop out, such as that girl's green hair, or maybe the yellow shirt here, or even Lil Yachty here, who is sitting there with a pinkish looking jacket, and he stands out fairly well from all of that red surrounding everyone. So now another album that was fairly successful in creating an interesting album cover is Lord's Melodrama. This was also on that same list of the Billboard 2017. Now this one is a little different. It's not a photograph and it's not photoshopped. This one is a painting, so it appears different. But what about it do you notice? A lot of the things that I have heard commented in our discussions in the classroom is the amount of blues you see on here. It's almost again calm or a relaxing tone, a lot of darkness. Someone had mentioned that it seems like her sun is being hit, or her face is being hit by the sun, which really warms up these areas in her face right here, as well as some part of her neck and shoulder. Using those warm colors again, those yellows, those uh, reds and peaches, to really bring her out and make balance between all the cool colors of the blues, the blacks, and the purples against that nice warm skin tone. So this one again was a very successful one. Although it's a fairly simple painting, it is interesting to look at. It is a portrait of someone, but again, it is lit beautifully. The warm tones in her skin really bring out a sort of emotion or feeling, and then the blues and the purples again just kind of portray again that melancholy uh, feel in the album. Now, next we're going to be looking at some not so great album design covers. This one right here is a Pitbull Greatest Hits album cover. Now, the reason this one ended up on the worst album designs is notably it is a fairly boring and fairly basic design of where an artist took a bunch of pictures and it almost seems like they were pasted together. There is not a lot of color going on. We are not quite sure what message he is trying to portray, but I did get a little bit of a 007 feel without the action in the background. Again, it's kind of bland, it falls apart. Is it balanced? Maybe. It is. He's got five figures, two on each side and one in the center. Pretty balanced, but again, it lacks in something that would make this interesting. It's pretty boring and it doesn't really speak to his music. Another one, this is an album cover, and you yourself can read what this is about. This was also considered on the worst list of album designs for the year of 2017. Now, this is something we want to avoid ourselves when it comes to painting and redesigning an album cover. This one itself does not reflect on what the American dream is. It almost seems as if it was meant to be an inspirational poster pasted on a sky background. It's boring, it's predictive, and it doesn't really tell me anything about the music other than it tells me by the words, but it doesn't interest me any other way in that matter. Is it balanced? Kind of. Everything's kind of in the center. Is there color? Yes. But does it create interest? Does it create any sort of emotion or any connection to the music? Not necessarily. So, this is also something you want to avoid as you're creating those album covers. Now, this is the last one we're going to look at. Pretty off putting as we look at it. This is an album cover for the band Arca, and the album is called Arca. And this was also a worst in the 2017. Things that people pointed out was that the album made you feel uneasy in a negative way. There is a way you can make people feel that uneasy way, but also get a message across. And this one doesn't do that exactly. The basic portrait of the artist has been blown up to get closer to the face, be a little confrontational in the eye gaze, but is not necessarily balanced. There is a lot going on up here at the top, and then there's a mouth at the bottom. So for me, necessarily, that doesn't balance things out. There's a lot of dark colors at the top, not really much going in the middle, and just black teeth at the bottom. Color as well, it doesn't give me a feeling of what their music could possibly be, uh, but there is color there. Again, this might lend a hand to making us feel uneasy about this album cover, or maybe horrified, or sick to our stomachs, I've heard some people say. So, this is again something you want to consider. We don't want a portrait close up of an artist, right? This is something you want to avoid. I want you to be creative about the process. And again, that influential artist, what do they say? What do they speak to you? So these were just a few of the good and the bad of design covers to kind of give you ideas of what to look for and what to avoid. Color wise and balance wise. So, as we're going deeply into this conversation of influential artists and how we're going to create our album covers, start looking at those different album covers, right? So, if you're looking at country, look at a bunch of country album covers, but also look at things that are different from that. So, if you're doing country, you can look at rock, you can look at classical, you can look at musicals, see how they portray their own album covers. Yours does not have to reflect the typical, like, say, country is just cowboy hats and a cactus, and that's all that's ever repeated. You don't have to do that. You can break outside of those barriers and create your own. What you feel is country music inspired from the musician, or pop, or rap, or hip hop, or whatever genre you decide to go with. But I thought this would give you a little more insight on what that good versus the bad design would look like. So, again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Email me. Just let me know what you need from me and when you need it from me. So, I hope you have a fun time thinking about what you're going to create. I will get back with you on how to create things later on in the process. So, have a great day and have a fun time creating.